Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Squared Up Coffee Break webinar. My name is Matthew Long, and this month we're talking about Office 365 monitoring with NiCE. I'm joined by our STS manager and, based on the last webinar, King of SaaS, Adam Kinniburgh.
Hi there.
And we also have a special guest with us this month. We have invited Christian Heitkamp from NiCE on to help discuss monitoring Office 365 with their NiCE management pack. So, hi, Christian.
Hi there. Can you hear me?
Yep, can hear you loud and clear. It's always the nerve-wracking part of doing a webinar with people who
Yes.
you physically can't see.
Great. Thanks for having me.
No, it's great to have you. So, yeah, we've had a NiCE on, I think, a year and a half ago now. They were discussing cross-platform monitoring, and at the end, we sort of talked briefly about their then upcoming 365 solution. Well, as you can imagine, after a year and a half, it's now released, and with a V2 sort of release coming up, and also with some pretty high-profile incidents happening in Azure and 365 in the past couple of months, we thought it was a good time to sort of get Christian on and talk about getting a handle on this huge, sort of critical piece of your organization's IT infrastructure that you don't own and have no control over. So I thought that was a pretty key point. So we're going to look at the sort of their solution, this monitoring MP that they've developed, have some demos as usual, and talk about the roadmap. Before we dive into that, I thought for those of you who might not have come across NiCE before, I would give a quick introduction, and I thought I'd borrow the same slide that Richard Benwell used previously, which is that NiCE are basically the kings of cross-platform monitoring. Like, if you've got any of these solutions on screen, you really should go and chat to these guys, because your business relies on these sort of components. They're typically part of your key applications, and it's not enough to have a great big hole, a gap in your monitoring, and you can't monitor these things. Notably, they have the log file management pack, which is a fantastic community management pack that lets you actually really get into cross-platform log monitoring properly, because the sort of offerings from Microsoft there are actually a bit of a lame duck compared to what NiCE have built. They've got their Oracle management pack, which again is really key. If your app's sat on top of Oracle, you need to have in-depth monitoring there. And they have recently now a VMware management pack as well. So if you're like Adam and mad into VMware, then you can now get that monitored too. Adam is desperate to talk about the VMware management pack. He
Not
really
this
is.
time.
But yeah, this time we're talking about Office 365 monitoring. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Christian. So let me pass the baton of presenter over now. There we go. And I'm going to let Christian take us through sort of some of the challenges of Office 365 monitoring with SCOM.
Yes, that's what you're going to go over. So, as I said in the agenda, I just want to start with a bit of a teaser and go over what's happened on Office 365 in terms of outages over this last 365 days, basically. So, and some of them went through press, and if you go to some of the websites or Down Detector or so, you'll find those, like how users really grumble, as they say, over sometimes of the outages. So I will cover some of them, starting with the most recent, which was actually 4 days ago. So on Jan 25th, there was a major outage in especially throughout Europe, where there was simply no possibility to access your mails of your Exchange Online mailboxes. So that was actually, you see here, a couple of Twitter feeds, and actually Microsoft then said, and that doesn't happen too often, that a subset of the domain controller infrastructure got unresponsive. Imagine that on Azure.
Yeah.
Not so cool. And that actually affected then logging on with your credentials. If you're using a hybrid environment, using ADFS, that would also be affected on that side. So really bad. So just was no possibility to log on. If you look that up, you will see a lot of really angry users on that. I put a rather nice comment on here, but yeah, they get gross.
I imagine there's lots of asterisks and stars in there rather than readable text.
Yeah, yes, you get that comic language. Yes, there was another outage, like flag to the right box here. Alex Simon, one of the Twitter commenters on that, who followed along. That was a North American outage where actually lightning struck one of their Nevada data center, and there was no failover of the MFA component. So actually most MFA accounts, or many MFA accounts, basically could not log on because the second token for logging on wasn't received, or the authenticator app some of you might use didn't function then, or it functioned but the token wasn't accepted. And the main problem was because MFA is primarily used for admin accounts, all the admins were also locked out and couldn't get in anymore. So that then it caused like everybody tried and tried again, which like then caused another problem that the standby was like immediately overloaded.
Yeah.
So then there were no bets, and so it took like a while until all that was put back in shape. So another thing that yeah, not something you don't want to see every day, I guess.
I guess the point here is that like Microsoft are humans too, right?
Well, yeah, in the end, so you think so the MFA was then another problem which was introduced by a patch. So that was here on November 19th. So they rolled a patch out with some new cool features, and that's obviously the beauty of the SaaS service. You get new features every other day typically. You don't have to put a new release in there. It just suddenly appears, new buttons come up and new features come in there, but sometimes new bugs also get their way into it. So in this way you have no control. It's a service you purchase, and it's still your responsibility to make sure your end users are not affected or have a good service available. And if they can't log in, guess whom they call?
Yep.
It's going to be your help desk, eventually you, and say, well, I can't get my email. I have to get that important email, business reports, whatever, but it's not there. So in the end, you're left alone with eventually the user will call you first. And in this case, actually, you haven't really a possibility to verify that. And that's actually why we started looking into this. And before I cover a bit the details on the management pack, how we can give you proactive information, I like to get some information how you're using Office 365 and what your like a bit of a background on your environment. So, and while you're filling out this report, maybe let me get Adam on here and ask straight up, do you use Office 365?
We do. We only use it. We don't have a hybrid environment here because I'm not allowed. So we are cloud only.
If you want to know how many different ways you can phrase the PO, can we buy Exchange, please? Adam's tried all of them.
Yeah, doesn't work here, I'm afraid.
Okay.
Well, yeah, so we are actually hybrid. Well, actually at NiCE, while you fill out this there, yeah, we actually have a lot of different tenants and a lot of different environments for dev, test, prod. So even our prod environment is a hybrid environment with Skype for Business still on-prem, so in a really hybrid scenario. So, but yep, I think we'll go good with the poll.
Yep, about 70% people have now answered, so I think we'll close the polls there and show the results. So if I click that button there. So yeah, the vast majority of people here are either using it in hybrid or they are using it purely as a cloud subscription like we are. I mean, that's quite overwhelming there, isn't it? What 40? Yeah, so 80% of people are either planning to use it, currently using it, or exclusively using it.
Yeah, that's what we see typically on most of the customers who come to us and ask about it, and especially we see a spike in requests after there was an outage. I wonder, but that actually helps us. So, and let's actually go a bit over the slides I have. So just a very short background. Most of you know us. We are having 2 locations, one in Germany, near to Stuttgart, basically between the Porsche plant and the Mercedes plant, like right in the middle. And then we have one office in California and US, and some of my colleagues from the US are also on the call. So great to have you on here. And sure, we're all doing monitoring since 20 years now. So, and working with all kinds of platforms and partners, and developed over the years a number of products. Matthew shows some of them already. So VMware, Office 365, Oracle, one of the biggest, but we also doing some more. So we plan Dynamics 365 coming out this year is a big one as well. So, and more on the cross-platform side, we're working on MongoDB and a couple of others in there. Good, let's get started. So we have had outages. Users might have called you. You had maybe your own experience with that. So how can we prevent that? So if you talk about monitoring a Microsoft product, the first you go to is Microsoft, because, well, if there's a Microsoft Exchange server, you get a Microsoft management pack. If there's Office 365, you go to Microsoft, look for a management pack, and you will find one. And so the question obviously is here, why does NiCE provide another management pack if Microsoft already does one? And it's actually the first time we do a same offering, or like an offering of a product for the same product like as Microsoft has. So, and why is that? Actually, Microsoft asked us to do it. So and so it was interesting because like they started with this product, and some of you have tried it out. It's very shallow, I'd say. It's just have basically a subscription to the message center. So when maybe Adam or somebody else, did you try it out? Did you have experience with that management pack?
It's Microsoft have approached the management pack, unfortunately, like a SaaS provider would. So they're giving you the ability to see if their platform is up.
Yeah.
But they are not taking into account the fact that all of the people using the platform aren't in Microsoft data centers.
Yeah.
So typically, I've seen many times where we've had email issues here, and the service health dashboard for Office 365 says everything's fine, but there is a downstream problem that it's not taking into account.
Yep.
And fundamentally, that's not what people use SCOM for. Like, it's far too heavyweight for doing something as simple as service monitoring like that. It really needs to be more, and it needs to take into account that it is very commonly used in a hybrid environment. And they just aren't catering for that sort of, I guess, like the main body of their customers who are using both.
And annoyingly as well, it has a habit of saying some users might be affected. And that's when you're a large organization that has multiple subscriptions, multiple tenants, it's not good enough to know that some users, maybe all of your users are affected, maybe none of them are affected. And your users aren't going to be happy with that kind of response.
Who are these users who are affected?
Yeah, I have to say, Christian, you were quite polite saying it was shallow. Our chat has not been so polite on their opinions of the official Microsoft Management Pack.
Yeah, actually, it's interesting because what you just said, maybe non-users are affected. That's what we often hear. You get an alert, actually tons of alerts, and we say there is a service degradation, and actually everything is working fine. Yep. It's just a neighbor on the same data center, just another tenant on the same data center that eventually has a problem, and you get reported that there's a problem. So it's like a complete false positive, like giving. Even if you forward that to a pager or something, you can really get angry, I guess.
Yep.
All right, and we had some others. There's multi-tenant. If you have multiple tenants, it's really a pain to set it up. It's really a pain. So, well, Microsoft said us, well, we need something else, and they asked us. So, and we said, well, yeah, let's go for that. And we had two customers that kicked that off with us. So, and we developed full monitoring for primarily for hybrid exchange in the beginning because that's the most complex use case. Now we move more to exchange online, and we see from the poll like many are on exchange online only, but they are hybrid scenarios, and those are typically in a critical infrastructure for the company to really make sure that works. And we added SharePoint, OneDrive, about other services. I'll talk a bit later in the roadmap, and building that really entirely on synthetic transactions, so like really like testing it, testing if things works. Because the biggest challenge for SaaS is you don't have access to the logs. So we love the log file provider, the log file management pack we do, but it won't help because the Exchange server logs, where everything is in there, we cannot access.
Yep.
This is hidden in the service, and we have asked actually, and we have, can you make an API to read something from there? And I said, no, that's service. And well, the only things that are left is like basically test and so use some of the PowerShell and APIs they're exposed to get additional information. There's some, but very little. The graph APIs, some, but even, not really more actually. So we're using primarily PowerShell and the Exchange APIs to retrieve information on that. And in the next step, we took that, basically that learning, and built it into SCOM so that it can really run from the SCOM platform, and I'll show you that in a moment as well. Secure, we do not require global administrator at any point in time. So obviously, if you want to have a test user, you need to set that up, but it's different than from the Microsoft Management Pack, where you need to create like an application secret that you need to use to build that up. And we support multi-tenants now with the 2.0 release that's coming up. So, and it's in preview right now. So if you have like 20 tenants, 30 tenants, 90 tenants, we're happy to look at that in a moment. Yep. How does the architecture work? Any questions? So we'll just chip in, Matthew, Adam, right? So
will do.
I'll just do a quick overview, like how do we build that? So we have I put 3 tenants out there now sitting in some regions, Azure regions typically, and now we have a collector, and this collector sits in your management group on 1 or 2 or more management servers. It's rather lightweight because it doesn't really do much of processing. It does run these tests, but these tests are not very resource intensive. So they're basically start, for example, sending an email and retrieving it to do a mail round trip flow test, and then report basically the result back. So this is it's a collector. It's not a service. It's a console application in the end, the .NET collector that is started by the health agent, the health service, the Microsoft monitoring agent, and is not running as a separate service. It has a little cache which we deliver for exactly those users, because yeah, we discover the users that are there to give detailed information on that, and we built that. That's basically built in there, and then the collector collects that information.
So, Christian,
yes,
I have a quick question. So, some management packs that come with a sort of a collector that runs and actually communicates with the system you're monitoring will specify that they have to have basically dedicated management server just for themselves. And you're saying here that that's not the case with this collector agent. You could just install this on 1 or 2 of your existing management servers, and you'd see more or less no overhead.
Yeah, if you have those 3 tenants, fine. If you have 50 tenants, obviously you start 50 processes to do that, so there is some overhead. So but it is really like, and it has a couple of variants there. So we do a connection if you also based on the users you want to the test users you do. We monitor all the users. I'll give that example in a moment. But if you're building more test users up there, obviously the workflows increase. But this is really again like just a process. So up till now, there's no problem just using one existing management server, except if it has only 4 GB of RAM and 2 CPUs and running, and you know it has to be a regular sized SCOM server, obviously, but we haven't seen resource problems really in that with the latest releases. Now we have this is multi-threaded, so it has a self-monitoring built in. So if like a long-running process is there, it gets shut off and so on. So there's a thread management in there that does monitor the threads as well. So really making sure we do not affect that management server.
Excellent.
Okay, good. So, well, if you have hybrid, things get a bit more complicated because we have to reach out to the Exchange server and get data from your Exchange server as well. So, and then we have the hybrid deployment, which is the link you want to monitor. Because let's assume you have a couple of mailboxes sitting on Exchange, a couple in the cloud, or you're going through a migration scenario where you migrate from Exchange on-prem to Office 365. Those I think 12% per users in the poll we did that are planning to migrate in the next 12 months. They're probably on Exchange server right now, but they want to move up. And during that migration phase, they will heavily rely on the Exchange hybrid deployment because some mailboxes and some mail transfer will stay on-prem. So we need to make sure that hybrid deployment is working. So, and there we have really done a lot of work into that because that will. We monitor that from a synthetic perspective as well. We receive information from the Exchange server through the Exchange PowerShell module to really monitor that link. Well, if you have different branches or internet breakouts throughout the globe, or even in your place, you would like to monitor, you can deploy geo proxies. These are just HTTPS proxies that route a couple of requests through that. So this way you can really make sure that your tenant is not monitored only from one location, but like simulating the logon and file download requests or mail sending through a number of different locations. So that is the other part we have in there.
Yeah, that's definitely super important for large organizations that, like you say, the users don't care why it's not working. They just care that they can't get mail. So deploying those geo proxies makes sense.
Yeah, this is the use case, Matthew. If you go to Australia and can't read your email, you call Adam, say, well, everything works fine here, right? So, and then like he can deploy a proxy there or has a proxy, and he can actually simulate your logon request for Australia and see, well, there's a problem and get that alert in.
Can I go to Australia, Adam?
No.
Okay, great. So a couple of use cases. I have a demo, sure, we'll get there. So, but I just want to do a bit of a theory in the background now first. So, and then we'll see. We have just a simple logon request. So we log on to our mailbox. We use a test user account. It seems simple to sign on here, but if you have like a hybrid scenario where you have an ADFS in place, you need to get a token from your ADFS and with this token, you will then need to sign on. If something in that infrastructure, like either DNS or your ADFS proxies or your ADFS itself, or even the AD has a problem, then this logon will fail. So we actually do a couple of checks in the background here as well. We also do an auto discover check first, an Exchange Web Service check. So a couple of checks before we actually go and retrieve the email. So the inbox basically see if you can access it. And then we return back, yes, everything is fine. You have email, it's in there. So and we measured the round trip time and can give you like an response on that. So a performance indicator, how good your performance is with a test user to do that.
Yep. I have to say I love this because we've been at Squared Up, we've been banging on about enterprise application monitoring for a while now, and this is one of the key crux points of like you have to monitor everything from an end user perspective. And like you said, this tests everything end to end. If this test works, users can log on and they can get to their mail. So I'm really glad that your management pack includes this kind of thing, because that's exactly what you want from a service.
Yeah, thanks. So we actually have a couple of cases here. So we do there's like OWA simulated logon, and then we have the auto discover that would be used by an Outlook client. And in addition to that, you can include the proxies I don't have on here. So we could route this through a number of geo proxies, and they would all log on to that as well. And okay, so we have checked one user now. Well, that's great, but my company has like 50,000. Like, how do I make sure? Do I need to log on to all of them now? No, that would just not be, would not make sense as well. We would need to be global administration, global admin for that. So what we do, first we go out and discover your tenant, like your Exchange mailboxes. So we go out there and look, we have 5 users there, we have 5,000 there, 1,000 there. And we look in which data centers there are on which Exchange Online service and in which Exchange Online databases there are on the Exchange servers. So this way we actually have a fairly good understanding how Microsoft distributed the mailboxes your tenant has throughout their data centers in your region you booked. Now they are multi-region since I think March last year. You actually can globally distribute the mailboxes. So it might be that you have one mailbox in Singapore, another one in Australia, and one in West US. So but you still want to understand where your mailboxes are. So and that's what we do. So we go out and discover that. So that's the first step. We'll put that in the cache. That's why we need a little cache there. So in the second step, we actually then go and say, well, let's make sure those mailboxes are healthy. And without logging on to them, the only thing we can do is actually invite them for a meeting. So we actually pick a subset, depending on the number of mailboxes you have, a subset, and you can choose if this is like 1%, 10%, or actually all of them. And then we go in a type of round robin mechanism to actually invite those users to a meeting. It will be not one user, it will be a number of users, and we get their free busy status and see if they're free or busy. And if we get that response with a certain threshold of time, we understand that mailbox is healthy, it returns current information. It doesn't tell us if the user can log on, because that can have a lot of different reasons for that. Password is not available, or some route from the Outlook is not available, but we cannot check that for all users. That would basically mean we would need to have an agent on every user's device in a company. So, but that's not the use case of our management pack here. But still we can make sure that the mailbox itself is good and working still with this. And if there's a problem, we'll actually retry with another one. And then we'll give you a health status for how many checks basically failed, and then give that information back.
Yeah. So with these 2 checks, you can finally now answer the question of, okay, Microsoft says there's some kind of outage going on. Does it affect me or not? Which is, super important when you, like you say, avoiding those false positives and reporting to management accurately whether or not an outage is currently causing you issues, not whether the service is up or down for your users. Very cool.
Yeah, exactly. So, okay, so we'll then go to next step. We'll actually send active emails between a number of users. So you can define send users and receive users. And if you have a really important mailbox that should receive mails, you can set up a rule for them that they're automatically moved away. But we do use the message tracing API to trace exactly the messages. And if, for example, a mail cannot be delivered, you will receive always an alert with the UUID for that specific message. So you can take that UUID, log into the Exchange Admin Center, and do the message tracing in there and see where it's stuck actually. So to that level of details, we provide you that information. So for mail flow. The more complex mail flow is like if you're using a hybrid scenario, so you have still your Exchange server, or will always keep your Exchange server, which is also a use case, and then we keep sending mails back and forth between the two Exchange servers, one in the cloud and one on your premises. The same actually exists for FreeBusy, and there are a lot of others. Each of these use cases splits down in a number of different SCOM monitors, actually. So we do the queue monitoring as well, and yeah, then quickly SharePoint. It's all about Exchange. So let's wrap that up quickly and have a couple of more slides on SharePoint Online. So the most important use case for SharePoint Online is really check if you can log on again. It does again do the verification if you get the token, if you're using AD on-prem. If you have external SharePoint users, you can also set them up and work with them. And again, we return that information if that works. Then second most important use case is uploading and downloading files, either for your web console, so you just do drag and drop, or you just upload it to a list, or you use the client or some client application that uses the API. So we also it's the CSOM connection to the SharePoint side, so we also verify that. So there are basically two monitors for that. There's health score as well, so that's also monitored. And then, yeah, the same applies actually to OneDrive. I didn't specify this, but we also have that all for OneDrive.
I'm definitely picturing some amazing squared up dashboards here with all the important user metrics on a nice big wall screen saying, this is how users view your Office 365 deployment right now. How the performance like, can they log on? I mean, that's exactly what you want.
Yeah.
And funnily enough, I imagine you have some to show us as well.
Exactly. Yes. Now we get to the fun part. Let's go to the demo environment. So let me pull this up first here. So I created a couple of dashboards. So these are primarily for the Exchange Online, SharePoint Online, and tenant health environment. So we have 2 tenants configured here. So most customers are using one production tenant, and eventually they have a test tenant. I recommend this to all of you. If you're from the Office team, get the test tenant. They are actually free. They're called developer tenants, so you can get these developer tenants for 1 year with 25 licenses and can try things out there. So it's rather straightforward. So or you can then purchase developer license or test licenses. So it really makes sense because before you actually start moving everything to production, you want to try out maybe some things, and most things actually go wrong during the migration. MX records are not set correctly, DNS doesn't resolve, so there are tons of things that can go wrong. So so in this case, we'll still have the dashboard here, so we can see the health. Everything is green right now. There's no problem, except we have 2 alerts in here. That is from our hybrid tenants. There's a delay sending emails right now between our Exchange server on-prem and the cloud tenant. So that appeared 1 hour ago, so that shows up here. So now we could roll in here all the way, but I created another one for end user performance. So let's go in here. So we have the Exchange Web Services user performance. So this is the time in milliseconds there it takes for them either from the web or from their clients, either Active Sync or Outlook clients, to reach the Exchange Web Service. So you can see good information. We can actually go here and use the great features to go back in time. So 24 hours, so I'll also do that by 7 days. So like all the charts will update. One important, which I think is the mail flow latency. This actually will tell you the time in seconds, how long it takes to deliver an email from user A to user B. So we see it can take sometimes a bit of a while. So it takes sometimes up to 40 seconds here to deliver an email. So you wait, as you sometimes think, where is the email gone? And we have seen that goes really up. We have seen that goes up to 10 minutes actually. So
wow.
That the email is delivered. So and then it goes away after a while again. But if you see this across a number of users and that it stays high like that, you can still go open a case with Microsoft. You also get the information actually between which user the problem is, and the message UUID you can also retrieve to actually then track down the issue in more detail. So we have the SharePoint logon performance here as well. We have the SharePoint health score. So 10 is the worst. So we have between 0 and 10, basically, a health score. So we can see up to 4 typically is not a big problem. So we had seen some other tenants, but that actually went much higher. So, and interesting is that's across the tenants pretty much the same. So, and then we have the OneDrive. Also no major problems over the last week or so I selected here right now. So there was one little hiccup where it took really a bit longer on the SharePoint to log on, but it went away. So, and okay, so we can drill in there as well. So let's go and look, for example, at the SharePoint level. What else do we receive there? Let's just jump in here and go to here to performance counters and see what else we have. So we have a couple of performance counters I just showed, like in the dashboard, some of them. So we have the file upload, for example, here. It takes via web to upload files to SharePoint. Then you can again drill in here, go over the number of times. And I'm sure Matthew could show this much better to you in the SquareUp dashboard.
I was just thinking, it's great when someone demos SquareUp for you and sells it. It's great.
Yeah, so thanks. So we'll just can go in a number of different areas here. And as I said, there are really around like 40 different performance graphs we collect on the different services. So, yeah, we have one more for Exchange Online here. So we have the mailbox distribution. So I said, well, can tell you where your mailboxes are. So right now we have them in Austria and Amsterdam. So we have really small tenants. So, and these are the number of active licenses here. So active mailboxes have an active license. So we have 8 that are currently here in Amsterdam. And then we have in Austria another one. So if Microsoft decides, well, let's move them over to Finland or to Ireland data center, you will immediately see up an additional graph and the number of mailboxes that are sitting in that data center there. Yep. So, and it moves actually over time a bit when they're moving a number of mailboxes between the data centers.
I mean, we were talking before the webinar, and when I first saw that graph, I thought to myself, oh, that's a bit odd. Why isn't it a top end that just shows like the bar from where they all are? And then, of course, Christian made the point that Microsoft can move your databases whenever it feels like it. And if they move your mailboxes around, do you know where your mailboxes are? And do you have legal requirements that change depending on where those mailboxes are? Funnily enough, you probably do, actually. So that's a really important thing to know historically as well.
Thanks for stealing my GDPR joke.
I mean, that wasn't a joke. That was a serious point.
My opportunity to stick one in there, that was gone now.
Oh, sorry, and we'll forget that I said that. In a minute, you can make a GDPR joke.
All right.
So Adam, anyway, do you know where your mailbox is?
Well, hopefully somewhere within Europe, Christian. But no, I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, anyway, in case it moves to China, this management pack can trigger an alert for you. How does that sound?
China specifically, or?
No, it actually will tell mailboxes moved to location X. Let's say, and you can define that there's the list of data centers in there. So, and you can put a threshold on, and they're typically for the data centers that are not in the region, they are disabled. But you can say, well, if there's one mailbox in Australia data center, I'd like to have an alert because that's not out of my region where they should normally be. If you have a multi-geo tenant, obviously, then this is eventually a normal use case. So, but then you can also configure it that way. But still, you will see where your mailboxes are. The funny question about GDPR is then, can you tell us who is on which server? Which are the names on there? And because obviously we retrieved, like, we look at the Azure Active Directory and get the whole directory structure in there. We'll know where the mailboxes are. We know the usernames, the email addresses, and all this stuff, information. So we had in this release, all this is it's not accessible due to GDPR actually. So it is encrypted. So it's actually encrypted, and we currently have discussions like if we can provide a tool to give like to the customer to get that information out, because obviously if there's an outage suddenly in Austria, I like to know which mailboxes are in there, or if somebody calls me on the help desk, I have a problem, that I can then quickly check on which data center they are. Currently this is not possible because this is encrypted, and the key, we don't have the key and you don't have the key. It's basically built in the product, so it can, the binary can decrypt it, use it, but you can't look into it. So but we considered doing a tool for that. Okay. All right. So yeah.
I was going to say, I just think this is awesome. I really do.
Okay. Let's look a bit of the hybrid area. In the hybrid area, so I have to at this point go to the SCOM console, because the hybrid case is something where I haven't created dashboards for yet. So yeah, I'll get back to you on that. But we just want to show like a couple of performance views here. So we have the on-prem component. So we do the same monitoring like auto-discover, EWS, mailbox logon, and so on-prem. We look at the mailbox count on your Exchange server and those details. So we'll get this information as well in there. So you can do like really synthetic active monitoring for your on-prem service as well. And in the hybrid use case, like if you bring both together, we, for example, can measure the time it takes to send an email from on-prem, or in this case, from Exchange Online to your Exchange server environment via the hybrid deployment. And that's actually where we sometimes have latencies here that takes some time. So, and we try to figure out even the other way around is even worse. So like here, you see sending from the Exchange server to Exchange Online emails really sometimes takes quite a while. You see 5 minutes here, up to 5 minutes. So, and then actually we time out. So we don't even go higher than that. So, but it depends. This is on this tenant. On other tenants, it wasn't a problem. So, yeah, this is something we can observe here. We can also look in the if there's a mail flow that has retries in it, like to retry to sending these emails, or in the mailbox migration. You can actually see if you're going from an on-prem deployment to Exchange Online, you can follow along how many mailboxes you use. You move from on-prem to the cloud, so kind of a cloud adoption report or graph. You can see like how mailboxes move across. All right, so that's a short overview here. What we do, we have these dashboards available, and maybe let's go back to the slide to cover a couple of last points here. So if you want to start this right now, there's a GA version 120. It hasn't there's no SharePoint in there, and OneDrive and SharePoint is with the 2.0 version, which is now available in preview. It's a private preview because we kind of like really to get feedback on that. So if you put like a public preview, many download, we don't get feedback. So this is really like if you say, well, I tried this out, I'm fine. Send us an email. We'll give you immediately access to that. You can try it out. But we kind of request typically then have a quick response to that, like yes, worked or didn't work so well or so on. Yeah, we'll really just be honest. And the GA is very shortly available. We're running the preview already for a while. We have this in all our test tenants in hybrid environments deployed. So when the GA will be very shortly available. So then that can also be used there. There's many things we change on usability testing and so on, and documentation. So we'll also do.
Yep, definitely worth a look, especially if you maybe you had a look at the version previously. So I think you've enhanced some of the sort of hybrid or cloud only sort of scenarios as well since the initial release of the management pack. So if you looked at this previously and thought, it doesn't really meet my use case right now, or maybe a year and a half ago, or a year ago when this released, you weren't looking at migration that strongly. Now is definitely the time to reconnect with this and, get involved, get on that private preview, give Christian feedback. I mean, the guys at NiCE are fantastic and they definitely do listen to their customers and then drive feedback into the product. So it's definitely worth doing.
Great. So, we have a roadmap. So let's look at that. So we're done with all of the above. So there's one which is called AD Connect. So this is again hybrid use case, and there are two types. Either you have like a password sync, or you just use the sync at your AD to Azure Active Directory. There's currently no management pack available for that. There are a couple of scripts out there that you can use, but we like to make that part of the Office 365 management pack. So that's what we're working on. And the second component is Teams. So we probably get into discussions in Skype versus Teams now. So yeah, we have that. Like I have that at least every week with customers. And it's not a discussion for Microsoft at least because they anyway use Teams. And well, actually, let me give a bit of a background. Last year, we had actually a Skype for Business prototype created, but it was really complicated because you had to deploy actually Windows servers or actually probe clients to a number of systems. You had to set up systems. So that was really going quite away from what we can do with SCOM, because you had really to spin up new systems to do that. And our approach is typically fully integrated to SCOM without building up other environments or systems to do that. So Microsoft has all that information. It's a service. And you might remember, if you do a Skype call, you get asked that question: how was your quality? And all that goes back. And Microsoft has that information, but they don't disclose that. So for Teams, it's a bit different. We have much more available in terms of APIs where we can get details on that. So that's what we're working on. We're still starting on that, but that's our goal, to have that provide something this year in this area.
Yep. So I've just had a question coming by the chat. Someone just asking about pricing. The thing to bear in mind with this solution is the pricing is quite complex based on the number of users and tenants and the services that you offer. So the best thing probably to say that offline and have a conversation with NiCE about the pricing on this pack, because it's not a simple like, you have this many users, it's this much kind of conversation. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, that's correct. So we really tier. We don't really count the users, but we give like a number of tiers based on the tenant size. So, but right. As Matthew said, it's really we typically look at the individual case on that. Also depends on the region. We have different pricing for different regions. So, let's better take that offline then. Right, reporting. Yes, I'll put plus reporting in 2019. So we're working on that as well. So there will be the SCOM reports, but we have quite good experience by now by having separate templates basically to run reports that you really can get like an SLA report about your tenant availability over a certain time, or like a tenant availability from an end user perspective, basically. So yeah, that's what we're also working on. And last but not least, I have a final poll. Matthew, if you want to bring that up. And
I will launch that poll now. And while people are voting, I will just read out the question. So someone asked, if you have a hybrid model, would it replace the native Exchange Management Pack too? Which is a great question, actually. And I guess it's more of a compliment, because the whole point of this management pack is to monitor the aspects of your Exchange hybrid environment that previously weren't being monitored. But because SCOM aggregates data from lots of different sources, you can take your monitoring of Exchange on-prem and maybe your archiving solution and your edge security solution, everything else, and bring it all together in one place. So am I right in saying, Christian, you would typically keep the Exchange on-prem monitoring you have and complement it with this?
It depends a bit on which version of Exchange you have. If you have the 2012 version or 2013, so with the old management pack, with the which has all the details and active monitoring, that makes sense if you have it configured. The new one is working way differently in this kind of, well, I say shallow again here. So it complements. So that's what is correct. So we'll not aiming to replace, because there are some service monitors in there which we do not have. So it is. But if the Exchange breaks, you will see it through our management pack as well.
Yep.
So it really depends on what type of level monitoring you need.
People are asking about Exchange 2016 and ADFS on 2016 server as well.
If you have ADFS, I just can recommend the ADFS management pack. It's been released. There's a new version, and I think in Q4 last year there was a new version, which is actually quite good. So I have it also deployed in our environment. So and I've heard good feedback on that. So the ADFS management pack, and there's active support for that from Microsoft as well. So, and it complements again the whole solution here. So in the beginning, we thought we'd do ADFS as well, like also active ADFS and on the ADFS farm and proxies and discover all the components. So, but the management pack is actually quite good. So if that's not enough, the ADFS management pack, then please reach out to me and say what you're missing.
Yeah, excellent. Right, I'm gonna close the poll now, because most people have sort of voted.
Just while Matthew's doing that, we'll just quickly mention, someone's asked if we're going to be at the Ignite Roadshow. I think for the first year, Ignite is leaving Florida and sort of traveling around the world a bit, and Squared Up will be there. Are you going, Christian? Is NiCE going to be there?
I was at the Berlin Ignite Roadshow, and my colleague, there's a colleague I think going to London. Okay. So but I know it's sold out, and he's like now asking somebody for some tickets, because in London, and we're going to, and we probably will considering Amsterdam and some other locations, but I think if you are in London, I feel very comfortable to send people by your booth and showing the solution.
Yeah, please
as well.
do.
Yeah, actually send us over. Okay, I think with that, I'm going to wrap up because we've gone slightly over time. So if you thought this coffee break was brilliant and this is exactly what you wanted to see, let us know what topics you want us to cover in the future. As you saw, Christian has a ton of management packs available, and I know Adam's itching to talk about VMware monitoring. So if you go to community.squareup.com, and that's our Q&A platform, we do thoroughly and regularly check all the questions there. So if you've got challenges with monitoring things in your environment, or you want us to talk about coffee breaks, that is a great place to go and sort of ask about monitoring challenges. In the meantime, you might actually get an answer from our community, who are way smarter than we are on monitoring all these different systems. So you'll likely get a great response if you go there and post your question. And as I said, we sort of look at the responses there and use those to sort of build coffee break content as well. So that's a great way of providing feedback to us. You can sign up for future sessions on our coffee break series site, where we post like upcoming topics and things like that. So that's a great place to send people if you think they'd be interested, a colleague or a friend who works in the same industry. And the recordings and slides and sort of extra content and links and things are published via our blog, squareup.com/blog. So go and check that out as well for a wealth of great content, not just resources from this webinar. I'll publish the slide decks there as well, so you can get those as well if you want to share those internally. And we have a very long now YouTube playlist on all our previous coffee breaks, which cover, as I said, there's a previous coffee break there from Christian on NiCE on Linux log file monitoring, which you should absolutely check out if you're doing cross-platform monitoring. But we have topics ranging from Squared Up specifically to enterprise monitoring to Azure to just use cases, the works. So definitely, if this is your first coffee break, you haven't seen this before, go and check that playlist out. I guarantee you'll find good stuff there that's really, really helpful. With that, I'd like to wrap up and go to Q&A. I'd like to thank Adam for joining us.
Thank you very much.
I'd like to definitely thank Christian for spending so much time with us and giving us his awesome demos.
You're welcome. Thanks for inviting me over here.
And thank you very much, guys, for taking the time to join the webinar. And if you have any questions, we'll talk to you next month.